Okay, so we left off by saying that there's a continuum of motivation from poorer to higher quality, or from more extrinsic to more intrinsic, or sometimes we say from more controlled to more autonomous. And all of that really means the same thing. It's where you are on that continuum. But that doesn't tell us how you move on that continuum, right? If you are feeling very guilty and introjected around health behavior change, how can you become more integrated around that? Or how could you help somebody else to do that? And this is where basic psychological needs come in. So again, we left off with this quality of motivation is predicting all of these different health care outcomes or health behavior outcomes. This is just, I just listed some that research has been done on, but certainly it could predict others. And then we're saying here that you need to have the experience that your basic psychological needs are fulfilled in order to have high quality motivation. So to the extent that those needs are fulfilled, you're likely to be more to the right of that continuum, or to move more towards that right of the continuum, to become more autonomous or more intrinsic in your motivation. But what are these basic psychological needs? I keep using this term, and so that's what I want to go into here. So first, just generally, what do I mean by basic psychological needs themselves? What does that term mean? So within SDT, this theory posits that humans have this set of basic psychological needs, and that these need to be fulfilled for optimal psychological and physical health, right? In order for humans to flourish and to grow as they should, these needs need to be met, and they are essential. And so they're basic in the same way that we have basic physical needs that are cross cultures, they're universal, and everyone needs these met in order to grow and to flourish. And so there's always sort of the metaphor of the plant that, we need to water that. It has an innate tendency towards growth, but we need to give it soil and we need to give it water for it to grow properly. And so again, these basic psychological needs need to be met for innate growth tendencies to flourish, that we as humans do have these innate growth tendencies. And this is a big part of the theory that is not necessarily shared with other theories. Not all psychology thinks that humans are innately oriented towards growth and flourishing, but SDT does. And again, these needs are considered basic in the sense that they're innate, we don't learn them, they're not acquired, they're natural, and that they're universal, they're not specific to cultures. And so this has actually been a big, this early in SDT research was an area of contention, but there's been a ton of cross-cultural work now that indeed shows that across cultures everyone has the same needs, but the way that we fulfill and express them may differ. So again, what are these three needs? Well, they are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And I'll say more about what each of these are. And you can also, if you're interested, watch. There's a video that will be posted as well. And if you want to hear it in the words of Richard Ryan himself with the fun sort of drawing graphic over the top, you can watch that there as well. And he explains what these needs are as well. And I'm going to go from bottom to top here, actually, because relatedness is probably the most straightforward of the three needs. This is shared with many theories in psychology, that it's essential for humans to feel that they are cared for and connected to others and have a sense of belonging with others. And so it's about needing others and also being needed, right? And so being close and connected to other people. This is an essential need, and if we don't have this, we don't thrive. Competence, this is another one that's also shared with other theories in psychology, that we need to have a sense of efficacy and competence or mastery in a context. And this is not just about being the best or having skills, right? It's not about winning everything or being the star basketball player. You could have a really strong sense of competence being a very amateur basketball player, but playing with your friends, because it's how you have opportunities to improve your skill and to gain mastery, and this gives us a sense of competence that we can learn and grow in our environment. And so it's that sense of efficacy that you can gain skills, and that you have some skills, and that you can continue to grow those. And then autonomy is the last one, and this is often the hardest to sort of grasp, because the word autonomy means things in the English language, but what they mean here is a bit different, right? This is really a specific psychological construct by what they mean for autonomy here. So it's not the same meaning of the word that we might use otherwise with autonomous cars, for example. But this here, what we mean is that it's to act volitionally or in accordance with your own internal values and goals. And so while this might be exerting independence. It isn't always that. You can certainly be dependent and volitional at the same time, right? You might choose to depend on somebody else for help. And so autonomy is not about independence in the way that we often think of it, especially in a Western context. And so, indeed, sometimes it's best to think about autonomy in SDT by what it's not, and so it's not independence or separateness. In fact, there's a whole body of research on autonomy-supportive relationships, and these being the most healthy ones for us in terms of our well-being, so we can certainly be close and connected to others, and those people can support our autonomy, support us in our choices, and support us in pursuing goals and values that matter to us. It's also not about individualism versus collectivism. People can be very autonomously collectivistic, or you could be really sort of forced and controlled in an individualistic society. I think many of us may feel this way, where you sort of feel like you're being forced to be more independent than you want to be, maybe. And so really it doesn't adhere to different cultures. You can be very autonomous collectivistic, you could be autonomously individualistic, or you could be non-autonomously either one. You could feel like those don't really fit with you, and so it is orthogonal, so is separate from culture. And it doesn't require an absence of external inputs or demands, right? So it doesn't just mean that you did everything by yourself without any consideration of any external inputs. So, for example, like with this class, right, you could still, I assign homework, but you could still endorse the value of an assignment and its importance in coming to succeed in your other goals, and so you can be more or less autonomous in doing that assignment, even though, of course, there's an external input or a demand that's asking you to do that. But to the extent that you endorse that demand, your autonomy could still be fulfilled. And so that's what those basic psychological needs are. And so experiencing that those three needs are fulfilled leads to higher motivational quality, so being more intrinsic or autonomous on that spectrum. And so, well, how do you have those basic needs fulfilled? Well, we need to support them, right? They need to be supported by other people and by the context that we're in. And so there's conditions that facilitate each of these different needs, right? So for autonomy, things that can facilitate that or help us to fulfill that need for autonomy is an absence of pressure, right? When there's more pressure to do something quickly or for a high reward, this interferes with our autonomy. Things that also help autonomy is providing a rationale, right? When we know why we have to do something, it's much easier to endorse it, right? If I just give you an assignment and I say, do it because I said so, it's going to be harder to endorse that as fitting with your values and goals than if I give you one and say, I'm giving you this because it's really an assignment to give you practice with critical thinking, and it fits with the goals of this course in this way, and this is what I think you'll get out of it. Presumably that should be easier for you to then understand that rationale and to endorse it, and so to be more autonomous. Offering meaningful choices, right? Not just any choice, but ones that actually are meaningful to the person, that give you different options that could potentially fit with your values and goals, right? So this is what I was trying to do with giving you synchronous and asynchronous options, right? That these might be meaningful differences to people and allow them to structure their lives in ways that fit better with their values and goals. Perspective taking is another important one, so listening to the person and understanding where they're coming from. This is a really key way to support their autonomy. Competence can be supported by giving people optimal challenges, right? If you overwhelm them with obstacles, it's really hard to feel competent. If you underwhelm them, then they're going to be bored. Also, informational feedback is really key to competence, right? In order to gain skill and mastery, you need to know how you're doing, and so getting information about that is really key. And so that could be, feedback about writing, for example. It could be, this is part of why I think people love a lot of the exercise tracking apps, is it gives you really clear informational feedback about how you are doing on your goals, right? And so this can really help us to feel a sense of mastery and control over that. And then relatedness, this again ties in with a lot of other research and theory in psychology, but to support relatedness you need empathy and warmth, and you need to acknowledge people's emotions, and then just have lots of chances and opportunities for connection with others. Then, of course, you can undermine these needs as well, right? And this would be pretty much the opposite of these things, lots of pressure towards certain outcomes, punishments or reward contingencies. Those also can really undermine autonomy. Rewarding people for things it leads them to then see that the reward is what drove their behavior, not themselves. And so that's a way to undermine it. Lots of deadlines undermines autonomy. Controlling language like you should or you must or you have to do this. People, that undermines their sense that they can do it of their own accord because you told them they can't and that they're not. Surveillance also undermines autonomy. So watching people really closely also makes them feel controlled. Even if you don't intervene, that's a really controlling feeling. Competence, non-optimal challenges. So if it's too hard or too easy, that undermines competence. And really negative feedback that's not helpful, or it's critical without providing information is not going to facilitate competence. It's going to undermine it. And cold interactions and isolation are going to undermine relatedness. And so this is important across all domains in which SDT is studied, but it's also really important with health because healthcare providers can facilitate or thwart these needs and really have a strong impact on our adherence to health behaviors. And so within healthcare interactions, right, there's a lot of research looking at autonomy support in particular in healthcare interactions, and so you could try to solicit and understand your patient's perspective, right? You could try to understand what is it that's making that's leading to this health difficulty right now, and really listen to their experience of it and how it's going for them. Then you could offer them, meaningful choices, right? And this often seems weird in the healthcare context. Isn't there just one best treatment? And sometimes there is, but sometimes there's multiple different things that could be done, different types of physical therapy, for example. Or maybe there is just one treatment, but it could be done at different times, right? Maybe you need to take a pill, but that could be done in the morning or in the evening. And that seems silly, but that could make a big difference in your ability to stick to that. If you're forgetful in the evening like I am, you could have a really hard time remembering to do that and have it with food in the evening, whereas in the morning that might be much easier to do and to fit in with your schedule and your routine. And that small difference can make a huge difference in how likely people are to actually stick to and take that pill. And so just offering those small choices can make a big difference. Also, providing the rationale for the behavior is huge, right? So I, was prescribed antibiotics at one point, and in the past I had been prescribed them, and you take them, and then you start to feel better, right? And it gets harder to remember to finish out the whole course of antibiotics. And then in grad school, I had a really great healthcare provider who explained that the reason why you have to keep taking them all the way through is that if you don't kill off all the bacteria, and the more resistant ones that got through those initial rounds of killing off bacteria that led you to feel better, those ones are still there, and then they can rebound and you can become more sick in the future. And so it's really important, especially with antibiotics, to take the whole thing. And that was really like, wow, that's a really important reason. That's a good rationale. I endorse that. I definitely don't want that to happen to me. And now I'm really going to be much more motivated and much more, I feel like I'm behind that, right? I'm more autonomous in that, to stick to that pill regimen now, because I see why it's important. It's not just because they said there's 12 pills. Like, I don't know. I just, sometimes they just tell you things and it may not have a reason. And so knowing what the reason is when there is one is really important. And then again, minimizing controlling language like you should and you have to and you must. Those are not great ways to get people to engage in health behaviors. And rewards, this could be a whole lecture, and so I won't go too much into this. And so rewards can sometimes get people to start a health behavior, but they don't end up being a great long-term motivator, because usually those rewards don't stay. And so they might be a great way to kickstart someone to get exercising, right? A free t-shirt if you go every day for a month to the gym. But then hopefully people then through that find other reasons that they're exercising. And so rewards are not a great way to keep long-term behavior change going. And if someone's already engaging in a behavior, they can actually really undermine the motivation for that. So autonomy supportive providers move away from this doctors knows best model. Even though the doctor may still know best, it's the way you present this information, right? And so you don't want to, these kind of physicians who are autonomy supportive are not trying to say, follow the doctor's orders per se. They're trying to give you this information about what's going on with you and what the different options are to give you some room for decision making within that. And so, but at the same time, autonomy doesn't leave the person alone to make the decision, right? You also still need to support their competence in that and offer them meaningful choices. And choices are only going to be meaningful if you understand them, right? If I say as your physician, do you want to take this pill called Zygel blah 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 blah, or this other pill called blue blah 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 blah, and you don't know what that means, that's not a meaningful choice, right? If they explain that to you and give you information, and so support your competence around that, that's also going to feedback and support your autonomy by providing meaningful choices. And so that's really key there, right? It's not about just letting patients do whatever they want that they found on WebMD, but providing them with clear information. Sorry, a bug just flew into my mouth. That's disgusting. Keep going though, so giving them clear information and so that they can make an informed decision. And then they can also, physicians also play a role again in supporting competence, right? Giving you clear information about that procedure or behavior, using language that the patient can really understand. Sometimes doctors will talk at too high of a level at their patients, or sometimes they'll really dumb it down way too much, and it can be really infantilizing. And so trying to get a sense of where this patient is at in terms of their understanding, and then speaking to them at that level is really important so that they understand what you're saying. So meeting them at the level that they're at and providing skills and training, right? Whether this is through the physician themselves, like your primary care provider, or through other programs that they can support you with and hook you up with. People often need actual skills to help them, right? Just having your physician tell you to exercise or to eat better, what does that mean? What is better? What does eating better mean? That may not be the same for everyone. Relatedness, again, is also important. Just having a warm and empathic doctor who acknowledges your feelings about things is also just important, even if they give you the same advice either way. Having them acknowledge that, this is really hard, or that sounds like that's really painful, and, maybe there is something we can do about it, or maybe there isn't, but just acknowledging where you're at is important. And this, this requires spending some time with the patient and often developing a relationship with that patient over time. And this is something that, as we'll see when we get to our healthcare policy lecture, isn't something that our healthcare system is well structured to allow physicians to do, right? So when I talk about not supportive providers, sometimes it's the person themselves and the provider and their personality, but often it's the way that the healthcare system is structured that makes it difficult for them to engage in these supportive practices. So I'm going to pause there, and then we'll pick up again with talking about some of the evidence that supports self-determination theory and its efficacy within the healthcare context specifically, and getting people to engage in positive health behaviors.